Did you know that someone was almost killed while trying to take the first ever color picture? Well, there's a lot more weird events that happened on this day, too. So here are some of the most interesting happenings on May 17th through the years. May 17, 1861, the first color photo is taken. When Scottish physicist John Henry Pepper proposed the world's first color photograph back in 1861, he had no idea just how dangerous his invention would be. He made two glass plates, one coated with a light-sensitive chemical called bitumen of Judea, and the other with a layer of pure gold. These were placed one behind the other, then exposed to light for several hours. After removing the object blocking the light, he saw an image, but it wasn't what he expected. Instead of seeing a rainbow of colors, he saw shades of gray. It wasn't until he added a liquid to develop the plate that he finally saw the first ever color photograph. And this is when things took a turn for the worst. See, the liquid he used to develop the plate contained a substance called cyanotype, which is extremely toxic. As soon as he poured the liquid onto the plate, he inhaled some of the fumes and immediately became very sick. He would recover, but this was the first and last time he attempted to create a color photograph. If he didn't pour the liquid on the plate himself, he would have likely been killed. Imagine if Harry Potter tried to use a self-stirring cauldron and it exploded. But enough about near-death experiences. What else happened on this day? Let's find out. May 17, 1940, D-Day is set by Eisenhower. On May 17, 1940, British and French leaders meet in a place called Argenteuil to decide the fate of France. At the time, Germany had already invaded Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And although they hadn't reached Paris yet, it looked like it was only a matter of time before they did. With the German army just 140 miles from Paris, most advisors thought retreating to the beaches of Normandy was their best option. Even though the Germans had already captured much of northern France, this still seemed like the best option. Of course, this was easier said than done. They needed an entire army just to defend the coast, not to mention the civilians who would also need somewhere to hide. But everyone was stunned when Charles Hunsiger, the commander of the French forces, suggested continuing the fight in southern France. Most generals agreed with him, even though it went against everything they'd learned about fighting wars. The plan was approved, and the retreat to the beaches of Normandy was canceled. This was known as D-Day, and it ended up being one of the biggest blunders of World War II. You see, once the word got out that France was retreating to Normandy, Hitler immediately ordered the German army to advance faster and capture Paris before anyone else did. Had he not done this, the Germans would have lost the war. In fact, it's estimated that only 1 in 100 German soldiers were actually willing to fight against the British. That's because Hitler was so hated in Germany that no one wanted to serve in his military. Unfortunately, there was nowhere for these soldiers to escape to since France had closed its borders. This led to one of the deadliest battles in human history, with over 3 million casualties. But it wasn't all bad news. You see, after the Battle of Normandy, Germany was forced to sign an armistice agreement and end the war. So, while over 3 million people died, it prevented another 10 million from dying. May 17, 1792, the New York Stock Exchange is founded. Wall Street may be the most famous street in the world today, but it's nothing without the New York Stock Exchange. So it should come as no surprise that it was founded on May 17, 1792. After the American Revolutionary War, many European investors started sending their money to America to help rebuild the country. Since there was nowhere to invest it safely in America, they brought it to the city of New York. Soon enough, brokers started trading these investments on the streets of New York. But as the value of these investments fluctuated, the brokers realized they needed to come up with a better system. On May 17, 1792, a group of 24 brokers met together at the Long Room in Wall Street to create the New York Stock Exchange. By the end of the year, they had traded over $2 million worth of stocks. Today, the New York Stock Exchange is the largest stock exchange in the world with a total value of nearly $47 trillion. Without the New York Stock Exchange, our entire economy would collapse. May 17, 2010, World Baking Day is celebrated for the first time. Who doesn't love cake? There's probably not a person on earth who would turn down a slice of chocolate cake with vanilla frosting. That's why it was such a shock when Eddie Kimball, the founder of National Cake and Cookie Day, decided to create a separate holiday dedicated to baking. At first, no one really paid attention to it, but over the years it's become quite popular. In 2018, over 2 billion Google searches were made for recipes. And last year, more than 1 in 4 Americans bought ingredients to bake something themselves. There are all sorts of theories about why this day was created. Some say it was to honor the birthday of Mary Style Urals, the inventor of the style Urals. But this is almost certainly not true since she died in 1880. The truth is, we may never know why this holiday was created, but it's safe to say it was a success. So, what do you think? Do you prefer cake or cookies? Let me know in the comments below. And now, for the wackiest happening on May 17th. May 17, 1915, the longest relief job in baseball history. If you've ever played baseball, you'll know just how boring it can be sometimes. There are often long periods where nothing seems to happen and you start to wonder if you should have stayed in bed. Well, imagine how bored the fans must have been on May 17, 1915. That's because the Chicago Cubs and the Brooklyn Robins played a game that lasted 26 innings. To make matters worse, the score was tied after 26 innings, so the game wasn't over yet. At this point, the coach of the Cubs, Joe Tinker, told the team's catcher to intentionally miss a catch. This would force the opposing team into extra innings, which would give their pitchers more rest. Although this is considered cheating, they got away with it and won the game 4-3 in the 27th inning. But it gets even worse. The next day, both teams played again, and once again, the game went into extra innings, but this time it went into the 31st inning. Once again, the Cubs coach told the catcher to miss a catch, but this time the umpire noticed and threw him out of the game. The Cubs were forced to play the game fairly, and they ended up losing 5-3. To make up for the loss, the Cubs and the Robins played a third game that day. And guess what? You guessed it, it went into extra innings. This time it only went to the 24th inning before the Cubs finally won 2-1. And that brings us to a total of 108 innings across 3 games. That's a lot of baseball. But unfortunately, this wasn't the last time this happened. The record for the longest professional baseball game belongs to the Pawtucket and the Rochester team. It was played in 1981 and went on for 33 innings. Thankfully, there were no intentional missed catches. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Comment below. Which of historical events was the most surprising? Did you learn anything new from this video? And if you could go back in time and change one of these events, which one would you choose? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another video. Thanks for watching.